All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. I wish I was doing this with teammates right now, as I was planning to do this year. But instead of playing baseball, we are playing slap fight, apparently, with these proposals, and just delaying and wasting time. So I'm here with Agent Rachel Luba again, and we are going to go through the most recent agreement. I have not seen it. I have not had time to go over it, so Rachel is going to be educating me about it at the same time that she's educating you about it. So with that introduction, take it away, Rachel. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so I think it'll be helpful to kind of put this into a frame of reference of everything that's happened up until this point. We started with, as everyone I think knows by now, the March 26th agreement.
Yeah, I've heard March 26th agreement. The term March 26th agreement
Yeah.
way too much.
In the beginning, I didn't remember the exact date, and then at this point now, it's like I can't. It's like a holiday now. The March 26th agreement.
It's like when you stare at the sun, and you just get this big black spot on your eye when you close your eyes. If you open your eyes, whatever, it's just always there. That's how I feel about March 26th agreement.
I mean, it's going to be a national holiday now for baseball, at least.
Hopefully not.
Anyways, so we started with the March 26th agreement. That was when, COVID happened. We shut down, and it was, we're going to agree to prorated salaries. Players will get full service, and we'll try to figure out how to resume season. And there were a few different criteria, whether it was, having safe conditions for players to resume again, travel, and fans being in the stands. And there was wording in there that basically said, right, if there are no fans, we have to figure out the economic feasibility. So that brings us to now all of this discussion. Right. And that's why we're in this position, is because right now we can't have fans in the stands, so there's a disagreement as to now what is economically feasible in terms of compensation for players. So it began, it was in mid-May. I don't have the exact dates of everything. But we had the first proposal that the owners agreed, right, was that they basically agreed to have MLB make a proposal to the union with a operations kind of manual proposal of resumption of play. So this was just like the protocol of all the different testing that they were going to do, safety protocol, like how do we get players back on the field? There was no financial proposal in this. Right. Shortly after, we get a leak from MLB, or we hear in the media that MLB is going to give a financial proposal, and it's going to be a 50-50 rev share. And that was when I think like the media reaction, whether it was from players or fans, kind of took off. Of this is crazy, or this seems fair, or whatever it was.
Yeah, because it was the first news of anything that like baseball may potentially be coming back, so everyone was
right. But it was it was like the financial part of it, right, which everyone realized that there was going to be some contention. Yeah. From there, we get basically the PA made it clear that proration is where we are sticking as players, and 50-50 rev share, no go. Players obviously were up in arms about it, saying, you had various players from around the league.
It was basically like a salary cap type of thing, right? And the main contention, I think, if I remember correctly, was the fact that MLB never actually released their books. So we had never, I think the PA had made a request or had talked about making a request. Well, for the financial information to see.
I guess but all this was just a media leak from MLB. Right. It was a 50-50 rev share, and there was all this talk and reaction, but at the end of the day, the unions, look, like, you got to provide your books, which they have not done. So MLB PA obviously is, okay, like, provide your books, but like, we're not doing a rev share, but if you want to do that, like, we have to see your books. So then we have, I don't know if it was like a week later, MLB makes an actual proposal, not just a media leak. And this one wasn't a 50-50 rev share at all. So everyone was like, I think everyone was kind of caught off guard by that. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, wait, this is not a rev share. Instead, it was the tiered system.
Right.
And that was where you have the guys like we explained in previous videos, Trout, who instead of making his $36 million, he was going to basically under the tiered system, he would make around like 5.6 million, I think, for the year. So the guys at the top obviously getting hit the hardest.
Yeah.
That was rejected by the union, and then you have.
I think it's important to say that it was rejected by the union without a counter proposal. So it's not like, no, we don't agree to that, but we're gonna make a counter.
It was like followed. So the way I think the proposals work when in a negotiation is obviously you don't have necessarily a counter ready to go. So you get your proposal and then you look at it and you say, no, we're not accepting that. Then you go back to the drawing board, right? You got to talk to whoever it is you're representing. So, all of us, we're all representing. The MLB is representing teams and the union is representing players, right? Agents are representing players. So ultimately it's the owners and the players who get to make the decision. We're just representatives.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
So now MLBPA, obviously after talking to the players, agents, everybody, we decide we're rejecting it. Then we go back and we say, okay, we're going to make a counter. This is now when the union responds with your guys' proposed 114 games, and this was at the proration amount. You guys also added in 2 seasons of the expanded postseason.
Right.
Which is important because that offers the MLB the teams make most of their money in the postseason. And they make it from how I think we understand it with the TV deals, depending on the length of the series and how many games are played. So if we expand it, we have more teams, more money from TV deals.
When I met with Rob back before COVID shut everything down, I had the one-on-one meeting with him, and he said that's one of the things that he was looking to do to try to grow the game is to get more playoff inventory so that, because that's when the majority of people watch baseball, and so there'd be more baseball in front of more people. What he didn't tell me as part of that meeting was that, that's when owners in the league makes the vast majority of its revenue and pays out the least to the players. So
yeah, you guys, and if anyone wants to go back and look at that video we did, I think it was of the 60-game season. Yeah. We talk about how the postseason breaks down how players are paid. But anyways, so they have the union makes the 114-game proposal with proration. And again, that's understanding that, look, players are taking an additional risk by playing. It's obviously understood by both sides since we can't have fans in the stands that there's still somewhat of a risk, which means, in theory, at the very least, players should be compensated at the proration amount, right? So they also offered, to do mic'd up things and, make players more accessible to fans.
Right.
At that point, we hear MLB basically leaks that, well, first of all, they say they reject it.
Yeah, they deny it, right?
And then they leak, and this was a few days ago, I believe, or about a week ago, that, look, they basically say, hey, under the March 26th agreement, we have the ability to unilaterally decide when to start the season. So they can start the season, at 50 games. And so they say, we have the ability to start and to implement unilaterally a 50-game season, and obviously under the prorated amount.
Yep.
So now we kind of have this idea. First of all, this is not an official proposal. They have not proposed a 50-game season, but they leak that, we can. They want to threaten us that it's a possibility, like we're allowed to.
Yeah.
And that would be at proration. So that's kind of, other than not having a season, it gives us a sense of like that's the bottom line, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like their fallback position. Like if worse comes to worse, like this is what we're gonna do.
So if we can't come to a deal, but then they, have expressed somewhat through the media that they would like to try to come to a deal. But at the very least, they can do that, and they want.
Yeah, that's why I've had people on Twitter recently ask me like, oh, well, is there going to be baseball? It seems like there's not going to be baseball. Yeah, there's going to be baseball because MLB is going to play, at the very worst, they're going to play the 48 or 50 games or whatever it is. They're going to unilaterally implement that. Obviously, assuming that we don't have another spike in COVID and that that it's still possible, because who knows what could happen. Since we've delayed so much, who knows what can happen over the next month.
So now we're at this position where about a week ago or so, they tell us that, some will say threaten, like we can unilaterally start the season at 50 games. So now this is when we have, just to go back, by the way, when we had the tiered system, that was at 82 games, right? Yeah. So then we respond with the 114, and then they say, well, we can unilaterally do 50. And then now that brings us to today, where we get MLB responds with 76 games, but now they're saying it's going to be roughly 75% of your prorated amount.
That's what was told to the media, though, right? That's what I originally read.
So I mean, they break it down. There's somewhat of a tier. So someone like you're going to be around 72% that you'll get. That's assuming there's a postseason. Now, if there's not a postseason, if COVID comes back and they have to suspend the season, then you will only get 50% of your prorated for 76 games.
So how would that work, though? Would they pay out based on, obviously, like, if that started, you would assume that there would be a postseason. And so would they be paying?
So basically the 75% is you are guaranteed to get 50% of your prorated amount. If they complete a postseason with a World Series winner and all, then you will get there will be the postseason bonus of an additional 25% basically of the total salary that they're paying out, and that will be divvied up to players depending on their salary.
But is that would be separate then from like the traditional postseason bonus pooling system, right? So
this is just how you're getting paid this year.
Right. So our paychecks would be based on 50% of prorated salaries.
You're
and then
guaranteed that.
Right. And then at the end of the postseason, if it went all the way through the World Series, then we would just get basically a check for 25% of our prorated salary.
Roughly that.
About. Yeah. Okay. All right. I understand. And then the playoff money would be negotiated separately. Like, so for the teams that make the playoffs that are playing, and
there hasn't been any talk of that. No, because remember, the way that's negotiated too is based on fan revenue and whatnot.
That's right. Okay.
So
the postseason money hasn't even been. So we're talking about going to an extended postseason, or MLB is talking about it, but they haven't discussed yet how. So now postseason revenue would be.
So that is your postseason revenue. You'll get 75. You will get like around 72% where you are. So
then if I make the postseason or don't make the postseason,
you are going to get roughly if there is a World Series winner,
if it finishes, okay.
Yeah, then you will get roughly 72%. Now, also they at their discretion they can decide they want to have postseason expansion for 2 years. So
at MLB's discretion?
In terms of how many teams they can, but up to 8 per league, so that would be 6. I mean, you could have 16 teams in the postseason.
More than half the league, okay.
So for 2 years. So obviously this year, if they have an expanded postseason, they're going to make more money from TV deals than they normally would with a normal postseason. Now, with their proposal, there would be 2 years of this. So next year, assuming we have a normal year without COVID and all that, they will also get additional money from expanded postseason. I saw quotes, I'm not sure exactly how much, but I think it was estimated around like another $200 million from expansion postseason. So that you will get no part of. Because you don't.
That would be subject to the collective bargaining agreement that we currently have, right? And so it would still be based on fans in the stands? Like if there's expanded postseason, then wouldn't it just be the same?
No, because they would get expanded postseason, then it would, but that's, the money that they're getting is based on the TV deals.
Yeah, but wouldn't players get paid like their postseason bonuses based on like, so if I make the wild card game, we get shares.
Sure, but that's based on the revenue that or of the fans
in the stands.
That won't ever change.
But with more rounds, there would be more fans.
But you'll have more players too.
Oh, that's a good point.
So, to go back to so
I see where. Okay, I'm on board now.
We can break down how that'll change, but just to understand what they're proposing this for right now. So you're going to have an additional expansion that really no players aren't going to profit off of that in terms of the extra money of having expanded playoffs. And they also got rid of the draft pick attached to the qualifying offer. So for somebody like you, this actually is applicable.
That part of it would be
because
good, yeah.
And so the way that works, and for I guess people who don't really understand, when basically the Reds will have an opportunity at the end of this year to extend a qualifying offer to you. The way that they figure out what the qualifying offer is they take all the free agents and they take all their contracts and they figure out what the average is. This last year, I believe it was 17.8. That was the qualifying offer. So they can decide to make that offer to you or not. Right. It's a 1-year deal. You can only be given a qualifying offer one time now. That changed in the CBA, but now it's one time. So they have, let's say the Reds decide to make you a qualifying offer. If you accept it, then they pay you a 1-year 17.8. If you don't accept it and you decide to go on the open market, whatever team signs you will have to give up a draft pick. And that draft pick, I won't make this too complicated, but it's based on a tiered system depending on how much they sign you for, etc. So they would basically give up, let's say they give up a second-round draft pick to sign you, and let's say they sign you to a 5-year deal. So they'll sign you at a 5-year deal, they'll give up a second-round draft pick, and the Reds, because you rejected their qualifying offer, would get that pick.
Yeah.
So now what happens in this situation is they are saying that you can go sign, the Reds can make you a qualifying offer. If you don't accept it, you can go sign with another team. If the contract that you sign with another team is, I believe, they have it at $35 million, I believe, or more.
Total dollars,
or has an AAV, so an average annual value of 17.8.
So the qualifying.
So more, yeah. Then that team that signs you wouldn't lose the draft pick, but MLB will just create a new draft pick. So let's say it's like the second-round draft pick. The Reds will get that second-round draft pick. But it won't
cost the other team.
Which helps you, right? Because that adds less of a burden for another team to sign.
Right, because that's what happens on the free agent market a lot is people are like, oh, well, we don't want to pick up that player because we're going to lose a first or second round draft pick. And so for people that don't understand about this, teams will value a first round draft pick somewhere between $50 and $90 million, depending on where in the first round, of total value to the organization over the time that player is in their organization. So if they're looking at signing a player who they value on the free agent market at, let's say, $40 million, and they can get a draft pick instead, or they're going to have to give up a draft pick that they value between 50 and 90, they're like, well, we don't want to sign this player for 40 because we're losing value.
So there's just always, there's more to just signing, a player. We saw that happen with Keuchel and Kimbrel last year, right? Once their draft pick that was attached to them left because the draft was over, then teams were more willing to sign him because there wasn't that attached draft pick compensation, that part they lost.
That part's
that
nice,
part's
at least.
Yeah.
That's like one of the first olive branches that I've seen from them, so that's good.
I think when you break this down, it's interesting, and I think we saw a tweet about this, that the total salary that they're offering to pay in all of their offers so far has roughly been around 33% of what the total original salary that MLB expected to pay. So every single offer that they've made so far they've just packaged it differently to you and said, here you go. But it's the same content.
Including some of the leaks, right? So like 50% or full prorated salary at
50 games.
50 games is like 33%.
Yes.
Plus the tiered system, if you look at all the different tiers and how it would break down,
when
that
you
they
total
actually
up the
proposed.
When you total up the actual salary, it's still the same. And so in this instance, what they're asking you to do is basically play an extra at 50 games that they leaked, right? They said at 50 games you would get the full prorated, because if they unilaterally decide we're just going to start at 50 games, then they would have to pay you prorated. The amount that you would make is basically the same as if you played under this proposal and there wasn't, let's say COVID comes back and there isn't a postseason, then you would make 50% of your prorated salaries, which ends up being the same as if you just played 50 games at prorated. So they're asking you to basically take a risk and play an extra, 26 games and you take the risk that you might make the exact same as if you just played 50 at full prorated.
Right. And there's an upside of we could potentially make a little bit more if everything goes smoothly, but we're taking on added risk of injury during those games, of sickness for both us and our family, and then also, if COVID comes back and the postseason is canceled out of our control, we're then not getting compensated for those extra 26 games. So basically, we'd be playing 26 games for free.
Yeah. And so they also added, and I guess, so the original, when the union made the 114 game proposal, there was a stipulation in there too, or one of the things that they proposed was that players had the choice to opt out of the season. And to kind of explain why that should be a thing is because you guys agree to play under the rules of the CBA, the collectively bargained agreement. If this whole season now is going to be completely against what the CBA lays out for what you guys agreed to.
Sure, yeah.
So therefore, it would only make sense that you guys shouldn't be required to play under these rules, these new rules that they agreed to. If a player decides look, I don't agree to that specifically, it wouldn't be fair to say you're in breach of your contract because you agreed. You didn't have a choice here.
Right.
So the union proposed that you could opt out. Now, if you opt out, you would only get the service that the MLB and the union agreed to give all players if there wasn't a season in the March 26th agreement. So a full year of service. Or
if you had a full year, basically the exact same amount that you had last year.
So you would get the full service. But you could opt out. So you could say, look, but you're not going to get paid, but you can opt out and you'll still be a free agent next year. You just won't get paid anything.
Would the players still get paid the advance that we were paid on, the $170,000 or less advance?
No, I believe you would give that back. So you're not going to get paid, but
so it'd be zero total dollars.
But you would get your service. Now, if you're a high-risk individual, and there are a handful of players that I think sometimes it gets forgotten.
I think of Carlos Carrasco, right? Who has leukemia.
Yeah. There are several players in the league, and again, I'm not going to sit here and those are health issues. I'm not going to name names, but there are players that would be considered high risk. They would be allowed, and as the union proposed, to opt out of the season. They would still get the full salary and the full service, and that seems only fair to me.
Who determines then, I guess, who is it?
That would be an agreed upon, mutually kind of agreed upon list, but I mean, I don't think there's a huge amount of disagreement.
At this point, mutually agreed upon between MLB and MLBPA doesn't seem too likely.
That's
Good
true.
Lord.
So in this new proposal, MLB has said players who are high risk can opt out, and they would get you would get full service just as everybody else, and you would get your salary just as everybody else. However, if you are not high risk and you opt out, you do not get service and you do not get salary. So should you opt out, you would not get service or salary. Now, I guess people are wondering, like, why would you opt out? Like, don't you want to play? And yes, I would say and correct me if I'm wrong here, I would say the overwhelming majority of players want to play right now.
It's 100%. Every single player I've talked to wants to be on the field. Yeah.
But there are cases, and I think, like, you know, agents have to kind of advise players and talk to players about the fact that, look, if you're Mookie Betts, you know, you're coming off of a great season. Under this agreement, let's say you're only playing 50 games, and, you know, whatever it comes out to be that he would make based on his contract, a couple $1 million that he would get to play 50 games. And he's going into his free agent year. Like, that's a big year.
Yeah, he's looking at potentially making,
right.
I mean.
So is it, like, you have to think about the risk that if you play for 50 games, like, how much are you going to move the needle on teams? How much are you going to change teams' minds? Like, in terms of that, like, for what they want to pay to sign you. Mookie is already Mookie.
Yeah, regardless of the season he has, he's still going to be like the premium free agent. Yeah.
He would be, let's say, he's playing 50 games and risking the potentially getting injured and being out for, you know, an entire season.
Yeah, God forbid, let's say he dives for a ball or he's rounding second, slips, tears an ACL, a knee, never really is the same, has to miss all of next year in recovery.
That changes his market.
Who knows what people are going to pay for him after that. So he potentially could be putting hundreds of millions of dollars at risk
to make a few million this year. So there are players, right, that, again, I don't think, like, when you just talk to any player in there, like, players, I mean, you guys are athletes, you want to compete, you guys play because you love the sport. So I don't think any players are really looking at it like this, but look, agents are obviously explaining that to players, and the risk reward, like, this is a reality, you have to think about it. And so the MLB's proposal, I think, is a way of basically making sure that doesn't happen. You can't have the Mookie Betts or anyone that would basically say, look, I don't want to risk getting injured to play in a risky environment, you know, and for only a few million when I have the opportunity to make, you know, a lot more next year.
Well, it makes sense on that aspect too, that why this proposal that they just sent over is worse than the potential 50-game proposal. So if we're going to make the exact same amount of money, why would you play an extra 26 games basically for free and take on all that added risk? Even if you aren't on contract already or aren't going to be a free agent, why would you take 26? Why basically would play 26 games for free, take the chance of getting injured, and then there's all the recovery that goes with it, all the psychological impact of the recovery that goes with rehab and the financial future of it, and the, you know, how it may change your game and stuff like that. Like,
I think, and again, I still think, like most players, and I know you're saying this from a very logical, just
I want to play. I would go out there and play. Yeah.
No matter, I mean,
I go out Wednesdays and Sundays and throw live at bats. Like, I want to play.
You talk about, you know, how you want to do, or, you know, you've said the 1-year deal things, and obviously that's super risky too. So, I mean, you just want to play, and you take on a lot of risk, but yeah, that's a reality of it, that, you know, the added games that you're basically, you know, taking on the risk. And I think the interesting part about this proposal is, first of all, they're asking players, the owners are asking players to, you know, kind of assume the risk and the burden of whether there's a postseason or not.
Right.
And in terms of what you get paid. Yet, and they think that's on you guys. Yet, we saw an interesting, like, stipulation that they made in their, like, operations kind of protocol, where they made clear in this proposal that they wanted you guys to sign an assumption, you know, or an acknowledgement of risk, that when you play the season, from the way, I guess, that we understand it, and from how it's kind of been put in the media, you can't hold MLB liable if they don't have the safety protocol up to standards, and let's say you get sick, or let's say your family member gets sick, you cannot sue MLB, so you have to trust them. And then this brings up another interesting part of, we're starting to hear about states saying, like Texas, and I've heard even New York talk about how fans should be able to be back in the stands soon. So
before we get into that, because that's a whole nother can of worms, but so in the case that we can't sue MLB because of the health and stuff like that, there's certain levels of health and services and accommodations that are negotiated into the CBA, correct? Like normally. So would they be able to, if we were to sign that, would they be able to go back against, like, would they be able to provide less services and less safety and stuff like that than what we originally agreed upon in the CBA without us being able to?
No, because the original CBA, the protocol is in the CBA is under a healthy, normal environment. So they have an added level of safety protocols that during these negotiations we're trying to agree to, but that those added safety measures are because of this increased kind of like risky environment that you're in. So the CBA has no impact because
I guess my question was, our safety, the player safety and stuff like that would never be less than what it was agreed upon in the CBA, right? It would just be like the additional stuff.
Right.
Okay.
But they're asking you to basically, they get to decide, right, when fans come back, if, fans come back in the stands, which in terms of just safety too, like, but, like you guys, once you sign that, once you acknowledge that, there's no way to even hold them kind of liable for any sort of, if there's negligence in their safety protocols. And we've never seen these protocols carried out. These are just theories of how we're going to do it. And so again, for high risk players, like it's a huge assumption or like acknowledgement of risk to just give away for free. And it just seems like you give away this piece, and then you in return for that you play 26 games for free. Right. It's like everything is being offloaded, it seems like, by the owners. There's no kind of ownership of any sort of risk. And I just, as a business owner, and any business owner I think would agree that it is a risky to be a business owner. There are risks. There are also a lot of upsides and rewards. Mm-hmm. And, if you want to share in both the upside and the risk, that's fine. You can do that as a business owner. But you can't like offload all the risk onto, your employees or whoever else, but then never share in the upside.
Yeah.
And that's what it seems like it's always, that keeps kind of happening here.
Yeah, the owners look like, we want all the upside, and anytime there's any downside, that's your problem.
Yeah, players, yeah. And then I think we have to like talk about the fact that if players come back in the or if fans can go back in the stands.
Yeah.
In terms of now, how does that change? Should you guys only be getting 50% of your 50%?
Well, yeah. So I guess that goes back to then the March 26th agreement that says if these initial conditions are met, then players are paid full prorated salary, right? So one of those conditions was obviously fans in the stands. So does it specify if it's some fans in the stands, if it's any fans in the stands, or all stadiums can have fans in this? Is there anything that specifies that?
No, it talks about like they will negotiate, or they will try to start a season. Understand there's a scenario where they have to start a season where maybe partially there are no fans in the stands.
Oh, that's right. There's a part of it that says that if fans are in the stands, players will be paid full prorated, right? So would that mean that, like, let's say we play in Texas and fans can be in the stands in Texas. I may get 3 games of full prorated in Texas, but then we fly to, let's say, Miami, and fans can't be in the stands in Miami, so I would get less for those?
So, I mean, you can speculate all you want. The point is, this isn't, like, they haven't brought that up, and why would they? Because if they can just get, because we already know how that works. Like once fans are back, I mean, it's full prorated.
Well, but if we sign a new agreement now, then doesn't the March 26th one get... I guess maybe you could structure however, but
because we're signing a new agreement because we don't have fans. But if there are fans back in the stands, like...
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, would the condition of fans being back in the stands have to be negotiated in the new agreement? Because we're signing a new agreement, so would the March 26th agreement all go away and the new agreement will govern it? Or would we just have this interim new agreement that until the conditions of the original agreement were met, we operate under this new agreement?
So, I mean, the way right now the proposals are working is like they are referring to, you'll get paid or you'll get the service as as agreed upon in the March 26th. So they are referring to that agreement for certain parts of it. Mm-hmm. The reason that what we're renegotiating right now has to do with the compensation part. So, I mean, in this case, I think it is still going the way that it's being talked about. Again, we don't have an agreement, so you can't say one way or the other yet. Yeah. But the way that they're making proposals, they are referring to parts of it. So I don't think I wouldn't say it's null yet. However, so to me, this is more of an amendment. But in a normal kind of contract scenario, like the most recent contract that you negotiate and agree to is the one that governs in rules, and any previous ones usually now are no longer applicable.
So basically what you're saying is that we're even further away from an agreement because all these things are going to have to be talked about at some point.
We have to figure out the fan part. I mean, what happens, and then, they have the upside of they're going to cut your salaries. They're going to be teams that probably by the end of the season are going to be able to have fans. And then they're also going to get the upside of an extra year. Like, let's say if it's $200 million more in expanded postseason that you guys aren't going to get. And, you broke down, you did some of the math of with even just the 75% of prorated, assuming there's a full postseason. What is that of your actual salary? The percentage? It was like
36%, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in it was mid 30s.
Right. Of your salary. So this isn't 75% of your salary. This is 75% of 50% of your salary, basically, or less.
Well, of the prorated amounts,
prorated.
right? So 50% would be at 81 games.
Right.
But yeah, so it's 75% of the prorated amounts.
So it's
if
not
there's a postseason.
So it's not, but to be clear, it's not 75% of your originally guaranteed salary.
Yeah, so basically the ask was like, I think I broke it down as like 36% somewhere in the mid 30% of my original salary, but playing close to 46% of the games.
Yeah. So you're playing, you're getting
close to half the games for a third of the salary. So there's this big cut involved. I guess another question I had was on, the ask for players to play basically the 26 games for free or for a chance that they could potentially make a little bit more. What would players get out of those 26 games? Is there anything that players get? I'm thinking for next year, arbitration eligible, like counting stats or...
I think it's important to, as players, again, while, as an agent, I would advise you, look, this is the risk that you're taking. And it could affect your salary next year. I think there's also, you have to explain it, and make sure the player understands the value of playing games, not just for your own competitive, drive and desire to play, but, the more stats, especially for, counting stats and just the numbers, right? Bulk numbers. The more games you play, the more numbers you have, the more innings pitched you're going to have, the more game starts you're going to have. For a position player, the more home runs you're going to have. That helps when you're going into the next season and you got to negotiate and you got to try to make a case for why I deserve this salary. Now, granted, the market next year is going to be very strange, and it's going to be an outlier and a one-off from any other market. But I think it's still important. It helps to have more games and to be able to have more stats to make a better case of why you should be paid more, the following year. Whereas if you have to cut those, if you have 25% less of those stats, which are already abbreviated, it's even harder to make a case. So there is value in playing games for sure, aside from just your, players just wanting to play.
Yeah.
And that helps to have fewer games, while I think it is suicidal for owners. And I'd like to think that they see that how much it's going to hurt their game in the long run. But, if we put that aside, having fewer games, they pay out less because, under a prorated amount, right? They don't have to pay as much to you guys. And then it helps them because they might want to have fewer games, because then you guys have fewer stats, and it makes their argument easier to say, like, no, you don't deserve this much in salary next year because these were the numbers you put up.
It seems like that, the entire time it seemed, we did a video on this on why there'd be only about 60 games, I think was our number. Now maybe it's going to be 50, but it's going to be about that. And it seems like the entire time the strategy has been, well, we don't actually care about getting a deal done until such and such date. So let's just see like how many concessions we can potentially get up until that. But that date seems to be sometime in the back half of July or early part of August.
Honestly, I don't think they want, like,
that puts us like another month and a half or 2 months away from baseball.
The more and more I see this stuff unfold, it's just, look, I think both sides need to come together and negotiate and figure something out. I think there is a reasonable solution here. I just hope that both sides can come to the table and agree to that. And I hope that the owners are seeing the detrimental impact that not playing a season will have on their sport.
It's very realistic that, you're staring a very, very shortened season in the face right now. And then next year, there's going to be all sorts of contention over the markets, and it's going to be weird, the free agent market. We've already seen some owners say that their rosters next year are going to be guys who are already on contract and people making the minimum, which means anybody in arbitration is going to get non-tendered. Any free agent, they're not going to sign free agents. I'm assuming other owners feel that way, just haven't said it. So now you're going to have this big supply on the free agent market, and then very, very little demand. And so there's going to be a lot of players out of jobs next year, and so it's going to be tumultuous. And then you're looking at collective bargaining, and if we can't find a way to find common ground during a global pandemic, then how are we going to find a global pandemic, an agreement that affects, like, let's say half a year of baseball? How are we going to find common ground on an agreement that's 5 years, that affects 5 years of baseball? So you're looking at a half a year this year, a tumultuous year of bickering and people being unhappy on both sides next year, and then a potential, then you have the collective bargaining agreement. So there's a potential of a lockout or a strike, just like there is every year when you have to negotiate a new collective bargaining agreement. So you could potentially have 3 years in a row of just bad all around for the players, for the owners, and for the fans, most importantly.
I could be wrong, and maybe it's just because I'm so clouded by what I see on Twitter. But I feel like, the owners have to be picking up on the sentiment of fans, of everybody, and how upset people. The NBA is going to come back soon.
Yeah.
Golf, soccer,
hockey. Football's going to be here. NFL looks like it's going to start on time.
If MLB can't start, and they're arguing over, millions, when,
I think Passon broke it down really well in an article recently. It was like a couple million, 3 or 4 million per team.
And they're going to make an additional, and let's say if we just do an expansion of postseason next year, that's another 200 million.
Yeah.
That, does that not cover the whatever they're going to lose this year? But I feel like this is so short-sighted. You're going to completely lose a generation of fans.
You've already lost a generation of fans, right? Before COVID happened.
Yeah.
Just with your bad marketing and not, I've ranted about that already. But now you're looking at losing even more of that generation because, and some of your some of the older generation that are longtime baseball fans are going to leave. I mean, you saw this in '94 when there was a strike. I think it was '94, right? That a large generation of a large portion of the fans left, and then just it hurts the sport so much.
Yeah, the only way it was the steroids that really.
Yeah, it's the home run race,
Yeah.
and then I guess so. We'd hope that we have a Sosa McGuire type home run race or something exciting to bring baseball back. But I mean, the damage.
Juice the balls now.
So yeah. Instead of juicing players, we can juice balls. 7 million home runs next year. Come out to the ballpark. And that's the most frustrating part for me, and that's what I've been like. There's two main sources of my frustration. One, I want to be playing.
Yeah.
I want to be on the field. I want to compete. I haven't gotten to compete in 9 months. It sucks. And the other part of it, though, is the damage that's being done to the current generation of players who you're missing prime years, or you're staring down the barrel of a gun of basically 3 years of no baseball.
Mm-hmm.
You're losing fans. The game's going to be in a worse spot moving forward. So like a lot of what I try to do in business and baseball and training and content and connecting with fans is to try to grow the game for the next generation of players, the next generation of fans, so they can love the game and have the experiences that I've had, both as a fan, as a kid, and as a player, and et cetera. And now you're looking at seemingly people that aren't thinking at all about the fans, and it's all short-sighted, and they're not thinking about how to grow the game. It's like, well, let me just get mine now, and then who cares about the collateral damage? That's how and it's people on both sides. And that's frustrating for me because it goes completely against what I'm trying to do. Baseball had a problem already. We don't need to make it worse. We need to go the opposite direction. Otherwise, no one's going to care about baseball in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And one way to make sure that happens and that is true is to have this pseudo strike lockout thing right now, and fight nonstop in the media, and then just fight nonstop in the media next year because of all the different changes and trying to make sure we save the bottom line, and then
right.
have the quibbles and strike and lockout and everything.
You hope that MLB and players will work together. I mean, that they have to do business together for a very long time. And so you would hope that, or you would think that if you have to do business with somebody for a very long time, you would try to have some sort of working relationship. And, both sides want to help the other, because you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, so one can't win and one can't lose, because if one loses, then everybody loses.
And that's kind of, I think the part, at least just the lawyer in me, that's frustrating, because I understand when you want to negotiate and you want a winner and a loser, it's a one-time business deal, right? You want to have
a trial or something, right?
Trial, I don't know, if you're going to buy a house for, and you're never going to do business with this person again, and you want the best deal for your client, you want to be the winner, hoping that, if you're the winner, obviously the other side's probably going to feel like a loser. But look, it's a one-time deal, that's it. But when you have a business relationship with somebody, an ongoing business relationship, the last thing you want to do is, if you come out of there feeling like, oh, we just won, and we just screwed the other side, then they feel like they lost. And guess what? They're not happy with you. Yeah. And that creates tension. When you have an ongoing business relationship, you want to have a win-win, negotiation. You want both sides coming out feeling like, hey, you know what? This is a great deal on both ends. And that's how, the best working relationships, kind of flourish.
And we seem so far away from that right now.
Yeah. So.
Oh, boy. Well.
Pray for baseball.
Pray for baseball. Yeah. I don't know. Are prayers enough to save us right now? I'm not sure. Hopefully. I guess that's where faith comes in. But, all right. Well, I learned a lot. Nothing that I'm super excited to hear, unfortunately. But that's the state of things right now, I guess. So thank you to all you fans for tuning in and watching. If you've made it this far, we appreciate you. Sticking around this long. I'm frustrated. We're all frustrated. All the players want to be out there playing and competing and seeing you guys out at the ballpark or interacting on social media or whatever. So missing you, baseball fans out there missing the game. Feel your frustration. We hear you guys and girls and internet trolls. Thanks for tuning in. See you in the next one.